So I'm just going to have a walk to the trench that we're opening up to the south of Hougoumont. We picked up an anomaly there on the geophysics, and I just want to go and have a look what's coming out.
You know what? The best thing about this is that it's really easy to dig.
It is.
Which is great. Oh my goodness,
definitely.
much better than normal. So
do you think that's because it's been disturbed by having something here?
I mean, the main thing about this field is that the farmer's done a lot of ploughing in here, especially with potatoes, which go really, really deep. And so all of this soil has been super disturbed, which is why it's going to be interesting to see if we can find any evidence of this chapel that was marked on Duncan's geophysics.
Yeah.
There is some rocks coming up in the back corner of the trench.
It does seem like there might be some bits of building material or the remains of it coming through, right?
Yeah, I mean there's a there's a lot of this limestone, isn't there?
Yeah.
So this is kind of everywhere, but we're also getting bits of red brick and everything, which is obviously not natural for this area. So and in a nice concentration in one corner.
Yeah. Yeah,
but now we've got
the corner where there's most stuff going on.
Yeah, okay. But now we've got to clear this bigger area to see if we can find the other edge of it, basically. There's a lot of hard labour, but hopefully it will pay off.
Not as hard as it usually is out here, though, Stu, right?
True.
So, Stu, I think it's starting to look like we might have some evidence of the chapel coming up here. What do you think?
Yeah, so we had this bit earlier from yesterday, and now you can just about see where it's getting slightly darker. Yeah. There's a bit more brick coming in, which is great. So we've cleaned all of this edge back. It's looking pretty sterile. But then just as we start getting here, more little bits of red brick start coming up, not just this white limestone. And then the soil's a little bit darker as well. Okay. So that is looking good for something kind of going around here, possibly. We need to get rid of this next, though. But...
Okay, so I was chatting to one of my students, Lisa, the other day, and she had some ideas about what a chapel in this area might have looked like around the time of battle. So I might go see if I can catch up with her and see if she has any ideas about what we're finding here.
Yeah, great. And we'll just carry on
digging. Carry on digging.
Thanks very much.
I'll see you in a bit. All right, so the chapel that we were looking at, it's not really clear whether it's on the road, as you might expect, a kind of crossroads chapel, or whether it might be further off.
Just in the middle of the woods, kind of with like a small path, maybe, that led to it.
Have you ever seen anything like that?
I mean, I know where I grew up, there's quite a lot of those, actually. Like, it's also, Bavaria is also very Catholic, and here as well. So there might be similarities, and what they often did is that they built small chapels, so quite small, like this one, often also in the middle of the woods, either for local saints or often even where someone had some kind of spiritual experience, apparition, or anything like that. Exactly, like a vision of Mary, the Madonna, whatever. And then, they would build chapels there and use it as some kind of retreat.
Right.
A very private religious experience. A small pilgrimage from nearby villages, or even like a farm like this. Of course, they were wealthy, they could afford it to build a chapel. So
you might just take a small walk into the woods to visit a particular saint, or...
I think that's how it was. Whereas, because of course they had the chapels here, but that was public. So I could imagine that maybe if you want to have a more private religious experience.
And the chapel that we were looking at was dedicated to Saint Anne.
Yeah.
So not our chapel here, but the chapel further out towards Nivelles. And do you know anything about Saint Anne?
I mean, I think if I recall, she's the mother of Mary, and she was a saint of pregnant women and women in general. So maybe that would make sense if it's somewhere near a path, that they could go there by themselves, and especially in the woods. It's, I mean, of course, like fertility and pregnancy is all connected. So maybe, and I can imagine women having a space outside of the main spaces of churches would make a lot of sense, because it gives them a lot more autonomy. Even it could be something like that.
It could be something,
and then it would make sense that it's secluded. Yeah.
So what we have here is a chapel that's possibly really similar to the kind of thing that we're excavating. This chapel looks to be a similar sort of size, and it's positioned on a crossroads, which is quite typical of chapels all across Europe, and particularly in this area. Crossroads have all sorts of historical and cultural significances which might be relevant to what we're finding. Also, the chapels are very much associated with Catholicism. They're dedicated to saints, and they often have quite specific purposes. This one says that it was built in 1814, so almost contemporary to the battle, and that it replaced an earlier chapel dedicated to St. Anne, which was situated about 250 metres further up. But that chapel of St. Anne was destroyed in 1775 by the Huguenots, by Protestants in the area, destroying the Catholic iconography in the Catholic chapels. That would fit perfectly with our own chapel, which is there on our maps in 1772, but we're not sure where it is by the time of the battle in 1815. Interestingly, for this chapel, which had replaced the chapel of St. Anne and is dedicated to Notre Dame de Valcourt, it says that it was used by brigands, which I think means rebels or outlaws. I'm going to need to check with a French speaker when we get back. If I read further, again, I think I get some of the French, but it has to do with medicine, some sort of medical purpose. I'm going to have to go and check that out. But it looks like this chapel was in use for a while. Here, there's a dedication on the lintel from 1814 to 1914, so it's obviously in use for a century. Again, calling on Notre Dame de Valcourt. And if I have a peek inside, there's still a little altar in there with candles and little statues of the Virgin Mary, or perhaps that's Notre Dame de Valcourt. And there's still some flowers and offerings. So it seems like these places still have some significance today. Hey Etienne, do you mind if I disturb you for a moment?
No, what's up?
Can I borrow your French skills?
Sure.
Thank you. I'm just going to step in the trench. Yeah, we've just been looking at a chapel close to here, which might be similar to the one that we're investigating over there.
Oh, nice.
And there's a plaque on the wall of it, explaining what the chapel was used for. And I've done my best, but if you could just confirm, did this have some sort of a medical connection?
Yeah, so by the looks of this, so this one was built in 1814 to replace a chapel to St. Anne, I believe had some connection. And yeah, so this was so before modern medicine, this would have been used to for les écroules ou scrofules, which is essentially scrofula, which back then was called the king's evil. So,
oh, really?
Yeah, so one method that people thought that would treat it, essentially, would be, well, at least in England, they go and get touched by the king, or at least touch the king.
Oh, so it wasn't the king that was sick? The king could cure this?
No, yes, because presumably something to do with divine right to rule. Yes, and so they didn't, I'm not sure who the king was around here, perhaps Napoleon at this point, which, yeah, so, and he was a bit far away in Paris, so... Yeah.
So instead of, as people did in England, going to the king for a cure, people are coming to this shrine, to this saint, and praying for a cure to scrofula.
Yeah.
And what is scrofula?
So it's a form of tuberculosis, which I believe is a respiratory disease. Okay. So it fills the lungs up with fluid, which, as you can imagine, is very pretty.
Ew. And does it not say here something about like swellings in the neck?
Yeah, so fistule purulente localisée sur les ganglions lymphatiques du cou. So, yeah, fistules on the ganglions, lymphatic ganglions of the neck.
Oh, that sounds really horrible.
Yeah, not going to be very pretty at all.
Thank goodness for antibiotics.
Yes, thank Christ. Huh?
So it looks like we have got lots of brick and local limestone coming up in the trench over there, which could be connected to the cross on the map from 1772 that we think might be some sort of local roadside chapel or secluded chapel dedicated to some kind of local saint, perhaps in a similar way to the one that we looked at, helping people to look for cures of particular diseases, or maybe even used by outlaws. Perhaps at the time of the battle it had already been destroyed by the Huguenots, or perhaps it was still standing to some extent. we'll keep digging and we will find out more.